When you see chaos on the world stage, what do you think? Is it madness or is it a method? Today we're diving into a geopolitical strategy that seems to run on chaos. Some people call it totally reckless, but others see it as a very specific, calculated playbook for getting things done when normal diplomacy just isn't cutting it.
And that really is the million-dollar question, isn't it? Are we watching a leader just winging it, flying by the seat of their pants? Or is there actually some kind of hidden logic behind all the apparent craziness? To really get a handle on the argument for the method, we have to see how it works in a real crisis.
So let's jump into a hypothetical but very plausible crisis. Picture this. It's April 2026, and this headline flashes across every screen in the world. The United States has just ordered its Navy to blockade one of the most important shipping lanes on the entire planet.
Now, this is way more than just a political chess move. It's backed up by very public, very real threats of military action against Iran. The situation is escalating by the hour, and honestly, the whole world is holding its breath. The stakes, they just couldn't be higher.
So why is this one spot so important? Why all the panic? It all comes down to this number, 20%. That single narrow choke point, the Strait of Hormuz, sees 20% of the entire world's oil supply pass through it. You mess with that, and you send massive shockwaves through the global economy.
Okay, so how did we get here? How did we get to the brink of war in the Strait of Hormuz? Let's quickly break down the chain of events that led to this incredibly tense standoff.
Check out how fast this all happens. First, peace talks with Iran totally fall apart. The U.S. immediately responds by ordering a full naval blockade. And they don't mince words. There's a public threat and a hard deadline of Wednesday. Iran, pushes back a little, closing the strait for a moment, but then they reopen it. And here's the kicker. Shipping starts up again and the markets rally. Instead of worldwide panic, there's this weird sense of relief. It kind of suggests the whole pressure campaign might have actually worked.
And this is where we get to the heart of the whole analysis. The idea that this apparent madness is in fact a very deliberate strategy. So let's try and decode it.
The theory has a name, calculated disruption. You can think of it as a three-punch combo. First, apply absolutely overwhelming pressure. Second, be completely unpredictable. And third, treat everything like it's a high-stakes business deal. The goal is pretty straightforward. Force an outcome that years of polite, conventional diplomacy just couldn't achieve.
So how does this actually work? Well, the playbook's pretty simple. Step 1. Create leverage. You have to make the current situation so painful for your opponent that they have to come to the table. Step 2. Apply the madman theory. It's a classic negotiation tactic where you act so unpredictable, so willing to go to the edge, that your opponent starts to believe you're capable of anything. And finally, Step 3. Set a public deadline. This creates a sense of urgency out of thin air and forces everyone's hand.
There was this quote that was going around during the crisis, and it just perfectly captures the spirit of the madman theory. Crazy respects crazy. It's all about psychological warfare. It's about showing your adversary that you can be just as unpredictable as them, but you're doing it from a position of much, much greater strength.
Now, if you think this whole Iran crisis thing is just a one-off, think again. The analysis behind this theory points to a much bigger and surprisingly consistent pattern of behavior. This playbook, it turns out, has been used before.
Just look at this timeline. You can see the pattern pretty clearly. Back in the first term, you had trade tariffs being used as leverage, and that whole fire and fury rhetoric with North Korea. Then, in this hypothetical second term, it starts right away with aggressive executive orders on immigration. And then literally, the day before the Iran crisis kicks off, another executive order, this time on psychedelic research, is used to just steamroll the usual bureaucracy. So the Hormuz blockade, it isn't some new idea. It's just the latest, maybe the most dramatic, use of a very familiar playbook.
Okay, but obviously not everyone is buying this brilliant strategist theory. There's a very strong counterargument that these actions aren't calculated at all, that they're just genuinely dangerous and unhinged. So let's be fair and look at the case against all this chaos.
The critics usually point to three major dangers. First, and this is the big one, the risk of somebody miscalculating is huge. This kind of brinksmanship could accidentally lead to a real war. Second, there's the argument that there's no deep strategy here at all, that it's really just driven by ego or impulse or something else. And finally, you can't ignore the political filter, where any bold move is automatically called dangerous by the other side, no matter what it is.
So what you end up with are two completely opposite ways of seeing the exact same events. One side sees strategic pressure, deliberate unpredictability, and smart deal-making. The other side sees reckless escalation,
ego and impulse, and someone just wrecking the global order. It's the same set of actions, just viewed through two totally different lenses.
So with two interpretations that are polar opposites, how are we supposed to judge this strategy? Well, the analysis makes the case that you should try to look past all the noise and the style and just focus on one thing, the results.
And for the people who believe in this theory, this is the most crucial piece of evidence. They argue that the outcomes tell the real story. They'll point to the first term and say, hey, all that chaos led to no new wars and historic peace deals like the Abraham Accords. And in our hypothetical Iran crisis, the intense pressure didn't lead to war. It led to the straight reopening and talks starting again, which was the intended outcome all along.
Which brings us right to the core thesis of this whole thing. From this point of view, the erratic behavior, the unpredictability, the so-called madness, that isn't a flaw in the system, it is the system. It's the feature, not the bug. It's designed specifically to keep adversaries off balance, while America holds the strongest hand at the table.
So we end up right back where we started, but hopefully with a much clearer framework for thinking about it. Is this approach a reckless, incredibly dangerous gamble that puts global stability at risk, or is it a ruthlessly effective playbook that actually gets results that traditional methods just can't deliver?
That's the question we're left with.